Professor, I can call you now, Senator, former Senator, Steve Keen, thanks for joining us at this unearthly hour down under. I'm glad that you did, though. I don't know about you, but I feel like celebrating the defeat of the Prime Minister, Morrison, and his crew. How about you?
I mean, it was a bit disappointing for my party to do as badly as it did, because it did, frankly, quite badly in the polling. But to see Morrison go was an absolute delight. And if I hadn't had the effect of, seeing poor results for the party I was in, I would have been out there dancing in the streets, even though my knee is virtually falling off with old age these days. So yeah, it's a fantastic outcome. And he's the lowest Prime Minister we've ever had. And it's fantastic to see the end of him.
Now, he is the lowest Prime Minister you've ever had, and you've had a few low-down skunks as Prime Minister. What was particularly low about him?
Complete lack of integrity. It really came down to personal characteristics in addition to his own politics. But if I had to summarise in one line, he's turned neoliberalism into a religion. So he's got from my point of view, and having had a relationship with a narcissist, he's a classic case of narcissistic personality disorder, as was Trump. So that's a good start. And a lot of people then use religion as a cover, which Trump, of course, also did. I believe he does too. And his religion is this, what they call the prosperity gospel. And the best example of how obscene this is that he had made a complete stuff up of getting rapid antigen tests for the country. And then, whereas in America, they were given away free, land of the free is not land of the expensive for medical, given away free in America, had to buy them in Australia if he could find them. And so a journalist challenged him at a press conference and said, some people can't afford to buy rapid antigen tests. His answer was, and I quote, some people can, some can't. Now, the only way he can dissect that is, he said, if you're rich and you love God, then you can buy antigen tests. And if you're poor and you don't love God, then you can't. And it's your own bloody fault. And that was the nature of the government he gave us.
Yes, not necessarily to be replaced by a better one, though. From what I know of the Australian Labor Party, you'll know much more than me. It's a bit two cheeks of the same arse, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not that badly, but it's close. I mean, what you have is fundamentally we're a coal and raw resources exporting country, with fundamentally coal being the major export, and the Liberals are beholden to the coal barons, and the Labor Party is beholden to the coal unions. And they basically, you get the worst politicians money can buy in the country on both sides. Better principles on the Labor side, with the union touch itself, of course, but they don't want to give away the revenue from coal or the votes from coal miners or their communities. So both parties have promised to continue opening new coal mines. Now that's the opposite of what we should be doing, and my party was, of course, saying we should shut them all down.
And what about poor Julian? Can he look forward to Albo doing the same in power as he said he would do when he was in opposition? Will the British be hearing from the new Australian Prime Minister?
I hope so. I think he will. I mean, Albo Albanese is a graduate of the political economy department at Sydney University that I helped establish. So he has a strong working class background, raised by a single mother and so on. So there's a deep degree of personal integrity to him, the opposite of what you saw with Morrison. And I think if he said that he's going to let Julian come free, then he'll try to do it. But I'm going to brace myself, because the extent to which Australia's been the lapdog of America through the last 20th century still continues today, and he may well get pressure to say you can't do that. Now, that would disgust me, but it's feasible that could happen.
Quite. What happens in Australia is a matter, of course, for the Australian people. It's not my job to pick policies for them, but I'm entitled to a view on Australia's foreign policy, which has been simply disastrous. They had a good relationship with their neighbour, China, and they chose to pick a fight with China to please somebody just about as far away from Australia as it's possible to be, namely the United States. Is that going to change? Will Australia at least now turn down the dial on belligerence against China?
It'll turn it down, but the dial's still going to be there to some extent. I mean, it's crazy when you're attacking China, you're attacking our major trading partner, and it's and there's a large Chinese community here as well. And of course, you're going to have your negative attitudes about the Chinese Communist Party and the effectively the classic 19th century imperialism we're seeing rising in both Russia and China. There's unfortunately, global power politics is back in fashion at a disastrous time for humanity. But you have to have a sane relationship with China, and I think that's feasible. It'll happen with the Labor Party. We have people like Penny Wong, who's Chinese heritage. Quite a few people in the Labor Party have that background. So the ludicrous white Anglo-Saxon garbage that the Liberal Party threw out that defined their political posturing, I think that's over. Whether the Labor will break away from the influence of the Americans, again, I'll hold my breath. I won't be happy if they fail to do it, but I have to brace myself that that's a possible outcome.
And what about the pledge to finally afford justice to the original Australians, the Aboriginal Australians? Is that just displacement activity, or is that real?
It's real. I mean, I think we should have Aboriginal representation in the Parliament by right, which is, of course, is the case in New Zealand, which is the progressive country in the Antipodes. So I think that I'm not sure that they'll go that far, but I think they should. Now, they certainly will improve the rhetoric on Aboriginal rights and Aboriginal people in this country. It will transfer to some extent, but I mean, you'll think about the two cheeks of the same bum. I described the Liberal Party as being neoliberal and proud, and they'll do stuff and brag about what they do. And the Labor Party is neoliberal and embarrassed, and they'll apologise for what they do, or they'll do much the same thing. This is one of the areas where they can break away from that category, but there's still, to go the full hog of saying we should have Aboriginal, First Nation people effectively having a stay in the politics by right. I don't think they'll go that far.
Now, you can measure our joy at Morrison's defeat in the almost hysterical response of Rupert Murdoch's media empire in Australia. It's a big defeat for Morrison. It's a big defeat for Rupert Murdoch too, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, as Kevin Rudd, and I've had no great time for Kevin Rudd as a leader of the Labor Party, by the way, but Kevin Rudd has started an anti-Murdoch movement, one that's looking like it's gaining momentum. And he pointed out in the last 23 elections, every last Murdoch paper has supported the Conservatives, the Liberals, as they call over here, which is a joke, of course. And they just threw everything they could at trying to get Morrison elected, and they've failed. So it's getting to the stage where the annoying squawk on the right of your ear, and you just basically ignore them, and that's good for the country. What I hope to see now is a royal commission into the influence Murdoch has had over the last 40 or 50 years in Australia.
And lastly, and I'll let you get back to bed, Steve, what for Her Majesty now? Is Australia now set on a Republican course?
I don't think so, George, I'm afraid to say. It's not a major issue over here. So if you do push for a republic, then that can be used as a divisive weapon by the Liberal Party, and they run you down. So it's probable we'll just put up with Charles and on we'll roll. The real sense of a national identity doesn't seem to be big enough to make us make that move. And the same thing applies in New Zealand. It's a much more progressive country. It's just not taken all that seriously, unfortunately.
Very interesting. Very interesting. That'll be good news in the palace if they're watching, as I'm sure they are. Professor Steve Keen, you'll always be Professor Steve. No one can take that away from you. the rock and roll
Indeed.
economist. Thanks for joining us at this unearthly hour.